welcome back to Room 237, and this is kind of a random review. My last video was for Cannibal by Mary and Dora, and this one is for the similarly titled but very different film from 1972, Cannibal Man, which was directed by, let's see if I can pronounce his name correctly, Eloy de la Iglesia, who was sort of a lot of his films back then had a lot to say socially and subtextually. He made a lot of films about, or his films were mostly about a marginalized Spain and the underclass, showed them in their day-to-day life, but with flaws and vices. And this takes it in more of a horror film direction. But he also directed films like The Glass Ceiling, which also had Vincent Parra, who is our star here. Also, I know he did a number of films at that time. No One Heard the Scream, Murder in a Blue World. Those are the ones I know for a fact were more horror related. It was written by De La Iglesia and Antonio Foss, and stars Vincent Parra, Emma Cohen, and Eusebio Poncella. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And the music is by Fernando Garcia Morchillo, if I pronounced that correctly, which I really do like the music, especially the vocal pieces. Now, this film is actually one of the original 39, the first group of 39 of video nasties that was successfully prosecuted and banned in Britain. And the thing is, a lot of films that were on that list, they didn't really watch the movies. Sometimes they didn't even watch the trailers. They just looked at the title and the VHS cover and thought, yeah, that's messed up. And then they sought out to prosecute it. I will say that the title doesn't really make any sense, and the cover really definitely makes it look more graphic and more like a slasher than it really is. It's actually kind of like a Driller Killer about 7 years before that came out. I mean, similar cover, actually kind of a similar story, but that one is definitely more of a descent into madness. This one is too, but this one has more tragedy put into it. It is definitely more of has more social commentary than Driller Killer. I have done a review on that, so feel free to check that out. Now, the reason why I'm only holding up the slipcover is because this is the release from Severin that came out, I think, this past September or October. And I picked it up the week it came out, probably because in my head I was thinking, Cannibal, video nasty, it's got to be another Italian film. But it ended up being a Spanish film, and I actually did pick up a few Spanish films while I was just non-stop buying Italian films. I guess I just had Italian on the mind so much. Now, it does come with a slipcover. I have to cover this up. That does give it more like a VHS look. Maybe this was the cover back then. I do know that the Blue Underground release has an actual photo from this scene, not like a artwork. And I will say it does have a decent body count. It has 6 kills. About half of them are fairly bloody, and this is the most graphic one. And I will say the blood is that really thick, fake, cheesy, vibrant red paint looking European blood. So when you finally do get to this scene, this looks more like a Tom Savini effect. So it is unfortunate they put this on the cover because, one, it kind of blows the gag, and also it kind of makes someone think you're going to get a much more graphic film than it really is. And it's not to say that where it's not as graphic, it's not as good. because it's still a pretty good film. It is one that I was surprised by, and it does take, I guess you could kind of call this in its own way a proto-slasher. But yes, it is similar to Driller Killer, but also slashers of its kind, like Don't Go in the House, certainly Maniac. I would say I like those two more than this, but I liked this more than Driller Killer. And the whole film really hinges on Vincent Parra's performance. He does do a very good performance. He's very believable, especially as this everyman who really, I guess, kind of becomes a killer through happenstance, and then he just has to keep killing more people because they keep finding out. Now, the Spanish title translates to The Week of the Killer, which is actually a better title, I think, than Cannibal Man. But it's also known in some territories as The Apartment on the 13th Floor, which, while I was watching it, I was like, our lead guy lives in a single-story house, so that doesn't make sense. But after a while, especially towards the end, it does make a lot of sense. And if this was a giallo, because the apartment on the 13th floor is a very tiny detail, it would actually be a good title for a giallo film. But yeah, this one is not. And in fact, I think this is the original theatrical poster. I could be wrong on that. Either this or the one that you saw in the thumbnail. So, Parr plays a guy named Marcos who he works at this slaughterhouse, which that also may be a reason why, if they did watch this, it was put on the video nasty list, because it's not a very gratuitously sexual film. It's not an over-the-top, graphically violent film. Like I said, this is the most graphic scene in it, but we do get a scene in the slaughterhouse in the beginning where we do see a cow get its throat slit and blood pouring everywhere. I'm assuming where it's a slaughterhouse is the early 70s in Spain. It is real, but it does feel more appropriate than, say, like a Cannibal Holocaust scene, because you figure the meat's gonna go to good use. He's this guy that's worked there for a long time. His mother worked there, actually died in an accident there some years ago. And there's some sort of, technology is picking up where people in his position are kind of getting laid off or fired because there's these machines that will do the work for them. He gets to keep his job as a scrap shredder. He puts all the scraps in this giant machine. It scraps and juices it all up, to be used for smaller pieces of meat, like soup. But he's out on a date with his girlfriend, and they're in the backseat of a cab. They're making out. The cab driver freaks out, pulls over, kicks him out, and when he refuses to pay, a fight breaks out. And when he goes after his date, there is kind of a funny line where he says, "I'm going to give you the beating your father didn't have time for." The way he said it, I thought was funny. So when he starts attacking her, Marcus grabs a rock, bashes him over the head, and, he tries to play it cool and quiet. She wants to go to the police, and kind of out of nowhere, I guess out of impulse and desperation, he strangles her. And he hides her in his bedroom. And the whole, like the Spanish title, the whole movie takes place over the course of a week. Every so often we'll get a title card of that day of the week. And it's just more and more people keep coming to the house, finding out his secret. And you can tell it's driving him crazy, but he's still kind of maintaining a good front. It's really not until the end do we really see he's kind of slipping from sanity a little bit. But the whole reason why he didn't go to the cops in the first place is because part of the social commentary of how he's got this old, small house kind of in the middle of this big lot where houses have been torn down to build these giant high-rises. And his is like the last house left. Which I guess some of the marketing was to make this look like a Last House knockoff, which I don't know how they did that, but... So, and there is a part where he says, you know, police don't listen to the poor people. You know, if you're rich, the police will be on your side and they'll listen to you. And, you know, where he's poor and marginalized, he feels like he doesn't stand a chance. All the while, there's this kind of mysterious guy whose name I don't even remember. Nestor, I guess his name was, played by Eusebio Pancella. He's this guy who keeps popping up randomly, and he really wants to be his friend. He lives in the high-rises. And, like, he keeps wanting to hang out with him, wants to go into his house. There are some parts of the film where he just pops up, like he just teleported there. He's always around. And he keeps saying kind of really things that are normal to say but are very specific to what he's going on. Like at one point he says he wants to go in his house, and he says, or he asks him why he still lives there. He was like, oh, got a house full of memories in there. And he says, you should bury them. Well, we find out at the end what that means. And then over the course of the film, I mean, he lives with his brother, but his brother was away. Then when he comes home, he lets his brother in on what he's done. His brother wants to turn him in, so he grabs a wrench. He bludgeons him, which that's a good kill. That's a pretty well shot kill. The cinematography, which I will commend the cinematography as well, done by Raul Artigat, if I pronounce that correctly. Like, there's some kind of, sometimes there's shots like when he's talking to that Nestor guy, where like Marcus will be like right here in profile, Nestor will be in the background looking towards the camera, and the focus will shift. The kill with the wrench, because he's got like a whole toolbox, like a shed wall where he's got tools hanging everywhere, right in his living room. But, you know, that was a decent kill. Then his brother's fiance stops by. She sneaks into the bedroom where he's hiding the bodies. He has to kill her. And then her father shows up looking for her, which is this scene. And this is almost like a blink and you miss it kind of death. It's very quick. Kind of like a Lucio Fulci's Zombie. Like, it's on the cover, but then when it gets to it, it's very quick. And there's this diner that he always goes to. One of the waitresses there, Rosa, you can tell has a thing for Marcus, and he's just not picking up on anything, even though she's kind of flirty with him. But eventually he needs to figure out what to do with all these bodies, so he buys a bunch of, aerosol spray and perfume, and he starts hacking the bodies up to put in a gym bag, douses it in perfume, brings it to work, and he dumps the body parts in the shredder, which is a decent idea. There's also this one, it's pretty amusing, but this older slaughterhouse veteran worker, there's a scene where he's showing Marcus how to use the machine, and he's telling him the story about his mother, about when she died. He was like, oh, she didn't just burn, she lit right up, and everything she touched burned to a crisp. The sound she made, people in the next wing thought it was the factory whistle and they stopped working. And oh my God, the horrible smell. You could never get the smell of your mother. Like, and Marcus is just kind of standing there. If this was any other movie, it probably would have been done in close-up with, you know, flashbacks or something showing how it's messing with his psyche. But this is all done in kind of like a far away shot. He's just kind of standing there listening to the whole thing. Yeah, this feels like one of those movies where we all know people like this, where they give their self-awarded bachelor degree in psychology. They watch this and it takes us into the mind of a killer, the psyche of a psychopath. Shows us what makes them tick. Kind of like when they watch a Rob Zombie movie. Not really. Yeah, it doesn't portray him as much of like a deranged, descending into madness psychopath like Abel Ferrara in Driller Killer. It is more just, he feels like he can't go to the cops. He feels like no one will help him. And people keep finding out his secret, so he's got to kill them too. It is more of like a tragic story built around this social commentary. There is a scene where he goes out with that Nestor guy. They go out for a drink, and the police show up, and they say, we need to see your ID, because I guess you have to have your ID on you at all times. He presents his, and it shows how he's all sweaty and nervous. Which I guess that's, I mean, yeah, he killed people, and he probably thinks they're after him. But I guess that's to show how nervous the underclass probably is dealing with police. And then when they ask Nestor for his, he's just like, yeah, I forgot it. No, I don't have it with me. And then when they ask where he lives, he's like, oh, I live at this address. Like, oh, the high-rise is very nice. Hey, that's okay. And just next time, make sure you have your ID on you. So, it does play up the social commentary in it. And him and Nestor get a little bit closer. And actually, they go out for like a swim, and he's starting to feel really good. And I think it's the next day, he goes to the diner, he has some soup, and Rosa says, oh, that's a new soup where we actually got it from your factory. So technically there is a scene where he eats human flesh, but it's by accident, and he takes like one bite, and after she tells him, he gets like really sick. It shows him like walking off, and when he's out by his house, he starts throwing up. And it's showing all these cool angles, like his vision kind of going like this, and then down below looking up at him while he's hunched over. And then like when he stands up, that Nestor guy is like right beside him. Like he popped out of nowhere. He's like, are you okay? But eventually Nestor invites him over to his apartment, which is on the 3rd floor. And he hands him these binoculars, and he says, hey, look, you can see your house from here. In fact, you can see right into your living room. Because his roof has like a giant hole in it with what kind of looks like a lattice. I don't even think there's glass in it. And you can see right into his living room. And he says, you know, I saw everything. I know everything that you've done. But I'm willing to help you. And that's when earlier lines, like telling him he should bury his memories, kind of makes sense. He's been there to help him the entire time. He even attempts to kill Nestor by breaking a glass, but when he pushes up to his throat, he can't do it. He tells him, you know, I've never had any help, but, you know. And then that's when he says, you know, I already know how to take care of the situation. Goes to a payphone, calls the police, gives him the address, and it ends with him waiting outside his house. But there's also the scene shortly before that where Rosa shows up. This is in between him eating people at the diner and, you know, going to Nestor's house. I guess you could also call it Cannibal Man, because he's inadvertently turning everyone into cannibals because he's putting human meat, you know, out there that's going to be put into the meat in stores, so he's turning everyone into cannibal, but it doesn't really go into that. And it kind of shows that people are going to pick up on what he's doing, because one of the supervisors is like, why does that guy bring a bag every day? They think he's stealing tools or meat. So it's kind of a suspenseful scene when the guy walks up, grabs his bag, looks in it, but he had already dumped it. And then when the two supervisors are talking again, they say that the samples coming out of the machine has been tested and they found some sort of strange element that's not in other meats. We know what that is, but it doesn't really follow up on that. It is more of just him getting to the point where he can't go on anymore and just has to call the police. So, it's a well done character study with the social commentary is more like 70s George Romero, not 2000s George Romero, where it beats you over the head, or nowadays where it beats you over the head. It is fairly subtle, and it does play in. Sorry, I'm wiping my nose a lot. I think I'm coming down with a cold. But yeah, you feel sympathy for the guy. He doesn't come across like a psychopath. It's just more, well, when he goes to kill Rosa, he does, it does look like he's starting to snap. You know, I also like the scene where she puts everything together. Like, she sees the locked bedroom, a little bit of blood on the wall, a cleaver over here, and it kind of camera shifts to all of them. And then she puts it together, and he's kind of ranting while he's spraying aerosol, like, see, it doesn't smell in here. Stay with me, you know, please stay. You can pretend it smells good. But then he doesn't really get that manic again. So it almost feels a little out of nowhere. Also, like, when his brother comes home, well, first when he kills his girlfriend, he's taking her into the bedroom. He hits her head on the wall by the door, and a lock of her hair gets stuck in the wrench. So it looks like it might foreshadow him being caught that way. But then when he comes clean to his brother, he notices the wrench and he takes off the hair and talks about it himself. But it's still well written. I would say this is underrated. You don't really hear too many people talk about it. I'm glad Severin picked it up. I was looking for the Blue Underground DVD. I would have just been happy with that, but I'm glad I got the Severin Blu-ray. Yeah, I can see people being disappointed seeing this cover, this title, knowing it was a video nasty, then having it not be as bloody and graphic, or really having any cannibalism. But if you like movies like Maniac or Driller Killer or Don't Go in the House, I do think you'll enjoy this. It's definitely more of a sympathetic, which even Maniac to a point has some sympathy, but Maniac is about a deranged killer. This guy is just more someone who can't take a break or can't catch a break and feels like he's got nowhere to go and nowhere to turn. And the highlight of the film is definitely Vincent Parra's performance. He is very believable as this every man stuck in this situation. But yeah, I thought this was a good film. I really enjoyed it. And I will be looking into more Spanish films. I may not get as heavy into it as I did Italian, but I do have a couple more Spanish films that I will be getting to. But yeah, that is Eloy de la Iglesia's Cannibal Man, the video nasty from 1972. Thank you for watching.